Now, I'm not exaggerating here, Blizzard have done more in one update on the beta this week than they done for the entirety of Cataclysm Classic when it comes to class balance. There has been an absolutely humongous post, and I'll be completely honest with you, I wasn't quite sure how to cover all of this in one video, because we've found out loads about Celestial Dungeons as well. So I'm going to split this into two videos, focus this one on all the massive class balances, reverting things that changed in a 5.4 state, bringing things forward from Warlords of Draenor, and generally just trying to bring the classes in line. Now, this is going to be by no means a finished product, and I'm sure there's going to be tweaks and changes following the beta raid testing this weekend, but overall, this is absolutely amazing to see from Blizzard, and I don't want to keep you hanging around, so let's see how your class was affected. The one thing I will say is any tier list you've seen, screw them up and throw them out the window, because quite honestly, just these changes alone will make pretty much every tier list you've seen, unless it was a tier list of fun classes to play, completely irrelevant. That's why I hate tier lists. Now, what they've basically said for their reasoning to do it is what we've been saying all along. All of the classes were balanced around Siege of Orgrimmar and the bosses in Siege of Orgrimmar, and went through many changes throughout 5.0 to 5.4.8. So they've looked through and made sensible adjustments, or what they consider sensible adjustments. We'll see how sensible they are when we actually put them into practice over the weekend, by making tweaks and changes. Now, they have said that they've also made changes to the functionality of certain abilities, glyphs and talents for specific specs within a class. So for example, if it was like Healing Touch for a Druid, but it was specifically Resto Druid, then the Feral Druid's version of Healing Touch isn't going to be affected. Just wanted to clear that up. Now, none of these changes affect instant PvP. So even when we get to looking at like mastery changes, the new mastery, or the old mastery that they've brought back, will work in PvE, but in PvP it will be the new old mastery, or the old new mastery. That makes sense when we get to it. Now again, like I said, throughout the expansion they will be monitoring this, so expect more tweaks and changes to come. Now, one of the most interesting bits here was where they've said about the fact that they know some of these classes will scale well throughout the expansion, but they're a little bit weak early on. So they've received an early buff, but they already plan to revert many of the buffs as basically the spec catches up. A prime example of this would be something like Affliction Warlock, where Affliction Warlock's super strong in Siege of Orgrimmar and even back end of Throne of Thunder, but up until that point, you'll see when we get through this list that Affliction is actually one that's had some small buffs. Okay, I won't keep you waiting any longer, I won't even plug Rested XP, but you know the links in the pinned comment in the description. So firstly, Balanced Druid's Moonkin form increased to the nature and arcane damage has been raised to 20%, and it was 10%. So a flat 10% damage buff. Shooting Stars will no longer split its chance to activate across multiple targets. So Shooting Stars is where you can reset the cooldown on Star Surge and make it instant cast. Ferals are now going to be able to get Nature's Swiftness, but it can't be used in arenas or battlegrounds, so you're not going to be able to get instant Cyclones out or anything like that as a Feral Druid. But this does mean you're going to be able to use it in cat form to get an instant cast Healing Touch to proc your Dream of Scenaria. So that's when you're going to get more damage from the next two bleed abilities. Well, it's actually physical abilities, but you'll use it on bleeds. A Guardian's Maul Rage cost has been lowered to 20 where it was 30, and this was actually a 6.0.2 change, so a Warlords of Draenor pre-patch change that they've brought forward. And we know Feral Druid as a tank is not really one that's well thought of in Mr. Pandaria, especially early on. So a positive change. For Restoration, Naturalist increased the healing has been raised from 15% and it was 10%, so just a flat 5% healing buff. Very nice. The Hunter one is bigger than it seems, and I got to be honest with you, I'm not very fond of it because it impacts 10-man raiding far more than, well, anything else. Because the only thing that they've had changed is the Spore Bat pet. So Energizing Spores can now only be activated while inside a battleground or arena. So Spore Bat now additionally knows a spell called Frenzying Spores, and this is an active ability that grants the same effect as Serpent Swiftness, but can only be activated outside of battlegrounds and arenas. So this increases melee and ranged attack speed by 10% instead of the 5% spell haste. Now I kind of see why they've done this, where it's like, well, we want you to take a Shadow Priest, an Ellie Shaman, or a Balanced Druid. But this is just going to affect 10-man, because in 25-man, you're going to have an Ellie Shaman, a Shadow Priest, or a Balanced Druid, most likely. Or it's not difficult to squeeze one of those into your raid if that was all you wanted them there for, was to get the 5% haste buff. Fire Mage has been buffed, so Combustion's percentage of Ignite's tick damage per second was raised to 50%, whereas it was 20%. I still don't think this is going to be enough for Fire to overtake Frost, but still, it's nice to see Fire get some love. And then Monk. Oh, I've just wanted to talk about Monk. I'm not even bothered about any of the others. First of all, Mistweaver has had quite a substantial amount of changes, so I'm not going to break it down altogether, but what they've tried to do is make the mana a lot better, because That's probably the roughest part of being a Mistweaver, especially early on. So they've increased the amount of mana you're going to get from Mana Tea. Surging Mist has had its mana reduced. They've changed my stance dancing, which I'm not too happy about, but anyway, like, probably no one was doing it, so it's kind of irrelevant. They've lowered the cost of jab, so again, that's going to help with a mana. Enveloping Mist has had its healing increased, and then the really big one, the actual fist weaving healing has been buffed quite big. So the Eminence healing was raised by 68%, moving it to a 42% conversion of damage to healing, where it was 25%. So they've reverted this from 5.2 and added in the Warlords of Draenor pre-patch change as well. Revival's healing has been raised by 43%, so that was a nerf in 5.4 that they've changed as well. So that's your real big raid-wide AoE heal. So it's not capped, it just heals absolutely everyone within like 100 yards for, well, a truckload of healing, but it was like just over 100k. Well, now it's going to do a lot more. And then they've made a really interesting glyph choice with Glyph of Targeted Expulsion. So this is where, as a Mistweaver, you can actually use your Expel Harm for 50% of the normal amount it would heal, but on somebody else. Well, they've brought back the old Uplift glyph, where it removes the chi cost of Uplift, but it's 10% base mana, and you can just use it whenever you want. So you can just get Renewing Mists out on everyone, and you're now not limited by chi. You can just burst loads of AoE healing constantly, well, for as long as your mana can hold out. But on the basis that Jab has had its mana cost reduced, and you're going to be wanting to be in melee because of the massive buff to fist weaving healing as well, it's probably a good way to spend your mana. Now, it's actually something that I used to do a lot back in original Mr. Pandaria up until this glyph was removed, because there was a glyph of Uplift that done exactly this, but it got removed because it scales incredibly well with gear. The better gear you get, the better mana regen you get, the less emphasis there was on needing to use chi, you could afford to use mana. So I'm pretty happy to see this back, but I don't think it's going to be overly useful until maybe sort of full tier 14 bis. I'm talking that sort of level of gear. And then Windwalker. Now, you all know, there's been two things I've been complaining about since the beta started, basically, and that was being able to fly on my ults at level 85 and then getting the 5.2 version of the Windwalker Mastery. And we've got both. And I'll be honest with you, they've done it in a really interesting way. So the Mastery where it was changed, so where it's got a chance to give you extra Tiger's Eye brew stacks, that's still in place when you're in PvP. But in PvE, it's the 5.2 version of Mastery. So this is where it only takes 3 chi to generate 1 charge instead of 4 chi. So obviously without the luck of the Mastery the way it was going to be, you're generating them faster naturally. And it increases the damage of your Tiger's Eye brew by 0.2% per Mastery. But this is absolutely huge, because this puts such a big emphasis on stacking Mastery. Mastery proc trinkets, obviously Rune of Reorigination when we get to Throne of Thunder. But even though the Mastery starts at 3.5% damage per stack, so that's going to be 35% damage, where with the old Mastery at 60%, it's very, very easy to get it over 60%, as in like in pre-raid bis and maybe a couple of items and the 3000 Mastery buff from Paladins or Shamans, you're probably going to be knocking on 70% straight away. So this overall is absolutely insane. Now, they have also said that the tier 15 set bonus, so this is going to be the Throne of Thunder set bonus, which we don't need to worry about too much at the moment, but this is now going to give you a chance to get additional Tiger's Eye brew when you generate Tiger's Eye brew, which is pretty cool. And then Paladin has got some love. Holy Paladins have got some serious love, and this is actually going to be really good, even though it might not be that obvious straight away. But Eternal Flame's periodic healing has been lowered by 28%, but Eternal Flame's periodic healing can activate Illuminated Healing. So Illuminated Healing is the absorb that you put on when you heal. And as a Holy Paladin, you're pretty much just coating as many people in the raid as you can with Eternal Flames. So Eternal Flame is a talent that replaces Word of Glory. So that one minor change on its own sounds pretty good to me. Even though Holy Paladin isn't going to be something that I play very often, that's pretty positive still. Because Illuminated Healing has also been buffed from 10% to 12%, which is very nice. Protection, the damage reduction from Sanctuary has been raised to 20% where it was 15%, so this is just a static 5% damage reduction. And the shielding on Sacred Shield has been raised by 43%. That's pretty big, enough to make prop Paladins super strong in phase 1? I don't think so. Retribution Paladin, however, I've seen good rep Paladins on the beta in the raids doing good damage already, and now they've had a really good buff as well. So Divine Storm, Crusader Strike, Judgment, Hammer of Righteous, basically all of your builders. I'm not going to read all of that out. All of your builders have had a damage buff of 10%. And Templar's Verdict damage has been raised by 20%. So your AoE and single target have both been buffed, because your builders that you use, which do AoE, things like Hammer of the Righteous or even a Glyphed Exorcism, have all been buffed. And then your single target from Templar's Verdict also been buffed, so that's very nice. Priests, however, you might want to look away. So firstly, talents. Divine Star and Halo now obey the AoE cap rules, so 20 targets for damage, 6 targets for healing before they start splitting the effect total numbers. So both of those are just going to do reduced healing. Now, a lot more noticeable that will be in 25-man than 10-man. I will put that out there. And the maximum times Cascade can bounce has been lowered to 3 where it was 4. You're going to notice that this is more for Disc Priests than anything else, because Divine Aegis has been lowered to 80% of the heals value where it was 100%. The tier 14 set bonus, where Penance has its cooldown reduced by 3 seconds, is now only having it reduced by 1. Atonement healing from damage lowered to 70% where it was 90%, so that's like 20% of your damage that was converted to healing just gone. That's a pretty rough one. Divine Star for Discipline Priest has had its healing lowered by 25%, and Spirit Shell's active duration has been raised by 50% to 15 seconds where it was 10 seconds. So you've got a little bit of a buff when it comes to Spirit Shell, but overall Disc Priest has seen a few nerfs. Shadow Priest generates orbs passively while outside of combat, which we've already seen, and Shadow Form's damage increase has been raised to 30% where it was 25%, so basically just a flat 5% damage buff. Probably well needed as well, to be fair. God, I need a drink, all this talking. Rogues have had some buffs as well, so Sinister Strike's energy cost has been lowered to 40, down from 50. Sinister Strike's weapon damage was lowered to 192%, where it was 240% though. But overall, Sinister Strike's cost and damage both lowered by 20%. This allows for more fluid gameplay and cycling insight, so it will count overall as a buff. So they say. With Assassination, the damage increase from Assassination's Resolve has been raised to 25% where it was 20%, and for combat they added a counter for Bandit's Guile that will track your Sinister Strike and Revealing Strike, showing how close you are to gaining insight, which pretty cool. Obviously have it through the use of weak auras, I would imagine, for you big brain rogues, but still, nice to see that it's just going to be baked in for everyone. Oh no, Shamans, you better look away as well, which you're probably going to notice by the time we get to the end of this, which ain't going to take long now, because there's only a few more classes to go. Any of these big S-tier classes, we're going to stack Resto Shamans, Disc Priests. Hunters seem to have dodged a bullet somehow, but anyway, they've all seen a little bit of a nerf, whereas everything else has been buffed, which so overall, really positive. So Healing Rain's healing has been lowered by 25%, which is pretty rough. Healing Rain's maximum duration through conductivity has been lowered to 30 seconds from 40 seconds. Ancestral Guidance healing and damage conversion has been lowered to 20%. It was 60% for healing and 40% for damage. For Elemental, Lightning Bolt damage has been increased by 10%. Again, Elemental Shamans probably needed that, to be fair. And then for Enhancement, Storm Strike weapon damage has been raised to 450%, where it was 380%. And finally, for Restoration, Chain Hill's fall off per target has been lowered to 20%, and Riptide's mana cost has been raised by 15%. I gotta be honest with you, I think Resto Shaman got away a little bit lighter than Discipline Priest did. Because with Resto Shaman, you know, the Healing Rain is absolutely amazing, but it does require everybody to be stood in it. So for fights where everyone's running around or you just can't stack in a Healing Rain, then obviously they're not really getting hit that hard. Their mana's going to suffer a little bit because of Riptide, but overall I don't think there's any cause for concern, because it's not really the overpowered massive HPS that Resto Shamans do, which is the reason why you take them. You take them for their toolkit. So I think Resto Shamans, don't panic if you re-roll to Resto Shaman, because myself and every other person is saying how amazing they're going to be. I don't think this is going to have much of an effect, if I'm completely honest. And then for Warlock, they've tried to bring Affliction online a little bit earlier, and Demonology getting some love as well. So Malefic Grasp damage has been raised by 50%. The damage your Malefic Grasp causes your other dots to deal has been raised to 50%, where it was 30%. Drained Soul damage has been raised by 50%, and then the damage of your Drained Soul causes your other dots to deal 100% damage, so that was raised from 60%. I'm guessing as we get through the phases, these are a specific set of changes that will get reverted. But then for Demonology, Wild Imp damage has been raised by 43%. The number of imps summoned by Glyph of Imp Swarm has been raised to 5, where it was 4. Hellfire and Immolation Aura damage was raised by 25%, and Chaos Wave damage was raised by 50%. So basically Demonology has just had a lot of love across the board, to the point where, will it be out DPS in Destruction? Still kind of don't think so, but nothing has actually happened to Destruction at all. There's also been a glyph change where Glyph of Eternal Resolve retains its original effects in PvP, but morphs to have the old effects from the previously removed Glyph of Everlasting Affliction. So what this does is increases the duration of the damage over time spells associated with the old Glyph of Everlasting Affliction by 50%, but decreases their damage by 20%. So what the old Glyph of Everlasting Affliction used to do was increase the duration of Unstable Affliction, Corruption, Doom, and Agony by 50%, but reduce their damage by 20%. I tell you, looking at some of these things, especially something like this, I feel sorry for the people that are behind the curtains when it comes to WoW Sims, because they've really got their work cut out for pretty much every class now. And then finally, the Warrior. So absorbing damage or taking damage while in Berserker stance now grants the Warrior Rage. Previously only taking damage to your health bar granted Rage, so that's a positive change. And they're trying to give Fury some love to the point where it can rival Arms early on. So Crazed Berserker's auto-attack damage increase has been raised from 15%, where it was 10%, so that's just 5% auto-attack damage increase there. Crazed Berserker's offhand damage increase has been raised to 30%, where it was 25%, and the duration of Berserker raging in Rage have been raised by 33% to 8 seconds, where it was 6 seconds. I personally don't see this being enough to actually say, no, you want to go Fury over Arms, but again, time will tell. Overall, though, this was just crazy. Like, a crazy amount of changes, not what I was expecting. I was expecting a couple of little tweaks and changes here and there for different classes. And if you watched my video a few days ago, I even sort of teased the fact that there was going to be something fairly big coming this Thursday, as in, well, it's currently 1:25 in the morning. I should really go to bed, but I'm going to end up editing this. But I must admit, I didn't think it was going to be quite this big. Now, I will put another video out, probably in a few hours, to be honest with you, about a Celestial Dungeon, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss that, because we now know all the loot that comes from them, how much currency we get, all the little bits and bobs, but I wanted to get this class one out first, so I better get going. I'll see you on the next one.